Get some!
Welcome to the Young Turks. Cenk, Uygur, Ben Gleib with you. Today, Anna's out. Ray Vaughn is going to join us in the second hour. Obviously, giant day ahead. War started in Israel and Gaza, and now perhaps Lebanon as well. We'll give you all the details. There are now US senators calling for an invasion of Iran. Okay. And we've got that story coming up for you later. In the midst of the stories about the war, of course, other news as well, including Donald Trump saying something, believe it or not, that is even an extra layer crazy for him. Like you can't, it feels like there is no bottom to that barrel, but his quotes are near direct similarity to Hitler's. So it's awful. It's not a great day of news, but we have to figure out how to get along. We have to figure out how do we peacefully exist in this world, and we have not yet figured that out. So let's try to do it together. Ben's got the first story.
Thanks, Cenk. Very, very intense news cycle as Israel was brutally attacked by the terrorist organization of Hamas all over Israel in a surprise attack that caught them off guard and slaughtered innocent Israeli citizens. Young people, children, babies were taken hostage. The elderly, women paraded around in the back of trucks, appearing to be killed, spit on by people. Israel has responded forcefully into the Gaza Strip with attacks of their own, toppling a very large building, resulting in the death also of many Palestinians and members of Hamas. Much more detail coming, some very harrowing video coming your way very shortly. But let's just set the stage a little bit better if we could. First, Palestinian militants abducted more than 100 people in Israel during a surprise multi-front attack in which they killed more than 700, the death toll now 900, making Saturday the deadliest day in Israel's history since the Holocaust. Israeli media said on Monday the death toll had climbed, like I mentioned, to 900. The captives are known to include civilians, including women, children, and older adults, mostly Israelis, but also people of other nationalities and soldiers. Israel's ambassador to the UN, Gilad Erdan, has said dozens of American citizens, largely dual nationals, are among those held captive. Hamas's attack, in which assailants rampaged through the heavily fortified frontier and shot unarmed civilians as they encountered them, has left the Israeli military scrambling to regain control of its territory. Palestinian militants have continued to fire hundreds of rockets deep into Israel. Currently, right now, there are still 10 areas of Israel that are under assault, and we don't know if there are more Hamas terrorists that are hiding in different parts of Israel. As we said, many of the hostages have been dragged back into the Gaza Strip as hostages and as bargaining chips. We would like to take a look at video A2, if we can, for a moment to help set the stage with some visuals.
Hamas gunmen smashed their way through the barrier that Israel uses to contain Palestinians in Gaza. The militants, designated as terrorists by the US, fired waves of rockets into Israel and arrived by sea and even in paragliders. It was a complex and coordinated attack. What followed was a bloodletting. This Israeli soldier was apparently lynched on camera. Civilians were slaughtered on the highways and in the towns of southern Israel. In Sderot, around 2 miles from the border with the Gaza Strip, Hamas gunmen overran the police station, killing dozens. It's now a charred ruin.
Some very difficult things to see, and we do have more videos coming your way, but let's look at one more video first to help set the stage before we go into a bit of discussion and then more videos.
Their nervousness isn't surprising. Hamas also took hostages, including women, children, and the elderly. They paraded some of them through the streets of Gaza. Israel says among them are US citizens.
And 9 US citizens already have been confirmed killed in this attack. Much more info, but Cenk, I'd love to get your thoughts.
Yeah, guys, so if you watch those videos and you see people screaming in agony over the death of their loved ones, and then the horror of having someone you love being kidnapped and being in a tunnel somewhere now, it is, I hope to God that you have a human reaction to that and are horrified by it. So we will discuss causes and consequences. And I don't know that Ben and I agree on all of it. And we will have a full conversation about what led to this and what we can do going forward and what makes sense as a response and what doesn't. And those questions are hard, they're complicated, but condemning what happened here to innocent civilians is not hard or complicated. No one should be in favor of that. We've got to stop killing each other. It's total, utter madness. This kind of pain is unbearable. Or we're gonna give you more of the facts, show you what happened, and then we'll give you the context of how this started and how it can end.
Thanks, Cenk. I look forward to the discussion as well. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu formally declared war on Sunday and called up 300,000 reservists for duty, signaling a possible ground assault into Gaza, a move that in the past has always brought further bloodshed, of course. However, Israeli forces face the unprecedented task of fighting an urban war while dozens of hostages are likely to be hidden in tunnels and basements across the Gaza Strip. In previous rounds of fighting, Israel has sometimes warned civilians in Gaza of impending attacks on residential buildings. It has done this either by text messages or phone calls to Palestinians. It has also fired low-yield munition warning strikes, which locals call roof knocks, on targets before bombing them. These measures have given civilians several minutes to clear the structure before it is destroyed. Although in practice in built-up areas, many civilians have still been killed. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres condemned the attacks as, quote, acts of terror, and said he was deeply distressed by the Israeli government's plan for a complete siege. Guterres began his speech by expressing, quote, utter condemnation of the abhorrent attacks by Hamas and others against Israeli towns and villages in the Gaza periphery. He said, quote, I recognize the legitimate grievances of the Palestinian people, but nothing can justify these acts of terror and the killing, maiming, and abduction of civilians, close quote. Like I said, the US State Department has confirmed the death of 9 Americans, very tragically, in Israel as the war escalates between them and the terrorist group Hamas. If we can skip to graphic 11, please. President Biden has spoke with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Sunday and reiterated his unreserved support, according to the Israeli government. Biden directed additional support for Israel, quote, in the face of this unprecedented terrorist assault by Hamas, the White House said. And Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin has also said he has directed the movement of the USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group to the Eastern Mediterranean to, quote, bolster regional deterrence efforts. Quote, we are preparing for the worst. We know there will be very tough days ahead of us, says political science professor at Al-Azhar University in Gaza City named Makaimar Abu Sada. But we have been in those circumstances many times in the past 16 years since Hamas has taken over the Gaza Strip. And in the end, it hasn't deterred Hamas. It hasn't stopped Hamas or the Palestinian resistance from fighting Israel. I would like now to show you a few more videos, and warning, these are graphic, but I think it's important for you to see them. We have blurred or used blurred videos where necessary. This is more detailed footage, A4, of Hamas taking hostages from Israel. And please pay close attention to the details. Please pay attention to the state of the woman's pants being pulled out of the Jeep that you are about to see.
Allahu Akbar!
Woman being taken. That was an elderly woman being taken hostage, as well as other Israelis being dragged into Gaza. The first video, if you noticed, the Israeli woman that was taken by Hamas, her pants around her legs area were all bloody. Presumably, she has been raped and is being thrown into that Jeep as well. And the second video was an Israeli citizen being hit with sticks in the back of a truck, being paraded around Gaza. Very, very frightening, barbaric videos to see. I'd also like you to take a look at video footage from A5. This is a woman at the music festival near the Gaza border being taken hostage by Hamas and ripped away from her boyfriend. And you can, what she will be shouting is, "Please do not kill me, please do not kill him." Take a look at this video. Very gruesome videos. You can see a more personal video now uploaded to TikTok. This is video of an Israeli family taken hostage by Hamas. Take a look. Very difficult to see. There's very sadly even more graphic videos. We have blurred the appropriate parts of this, but important to see. This is an Israeli that is being killed or attempted killed by a member of Hamas holding a farming hoe, and you can see him in this video. It is blurred appropriately. The man was bleeding out, and the member of Hamas then took the hoe. I saw the unedited, uncensored video and tried to behead him by striking him in the neck from behind multiple times. One more video here, A8. This is a child being grabbed hostage by Hamas. Those last two are videos shot and released by Hamas itself. They are proud of these videos. Obviously, you wouldn't release them otherwise. And finally, I would like to show you first the photo of a young woman, an Israeli citizen from Germany named Shani Luke. This is what she looks like. If you can, it's part of the, I'm sorry, I believe it's part of the video, or we don't have the photo, but we don't have the photo, fair enough, my apologies. But you will see the video, permission granted from her mother to show this being paraded around in the back of a truck in the Gaza Strip after being taken hostage and likely killed.
Sorry, we don't.
I'm so sorry we don't have that video. Okay. I was told we had the video, but in the video you see a woman lifeless, face down in the back of the truck, and people coming up to the back of the truck and spitting on her lifeless body. Her mother hopes she is alive. There did not seem to be many signs of life in the video, but we pray that she will be found alive and somehow returned. So that's a lot of the facts on the ground, and as Cenk said, the situation's much more complex, so let's get into it.
Yeah. So guys, so the videos we showed you are the ones we're allowed to show you, but Ben is referring to confirmed videos that exist, but we're not allowed to show you. And so that happens normally in wars like this. If you're watching those videos and you're not moved by it, there's something wrong with you. So these are innocent civilians that are getting killed, and it's heartbreaking. Just look, it doesn't take much imagination. Imagine, I always ask people, shoe on the other foot. What if it happened to you? Switch the side. See how you think about it then. And I don't know which side anybody you are on, and most of you are on neither side, right? But imagine that a family member was kidnapped in a horrific way like that, and you have no idea where they are, and you got your other family members crying there like that, the little kids and stuff. It's unimaginable, unimaginable. So, okay, but the conflict did not start today or over Saturday. This conflict's been going on for about 75 years, almost exactly 75 years. And unfortunately, the occupation has been going on between 56 and 75 years, depending on how you look at it. So first of all, Hamas going in and killing civilians, totally unacceptable. That's easy, right? Hamas attacking soldiers, that's not terrorism. It's not the definition of terrorism. It isn't terrorism, period. Now, having said that, when Israel goes in to kill Hamas soldiers, also nothing wrong with that. And so for the Hamas that crossed over to Israel to do this invasion, well, of course, Israel has every right to defend itself in that context and every right to kill every member of Hamas that was part of the invasion. They're soldiers. Soldiers kill soldiers. Now, I hate that too. I wish none of that existed. And if you just remove the stupid titles, Israeli, Palestinian, and you just made them all Palestinian or all Israeli or all Norwegian, they would probably stop killing each other. But no, we got to go with ethnicities and nationalities and titles, and we have to hate each other for no goddamn reason. So, okay. So Israel counterstriking, of course they're going to counterstrike, right? So no one says that they're not allowed to defend themselves. If they do, that's ridiculous, right? The question is, how do you counterstrike? Already 78 Palestinian children dead. So now you can say, hey, I don't care, Israel can do whatever the hell they want, they got invaded. Well, then by that logic, I would then say, well, the Palestinians were occupied for 50 to 75 years. Can they do whatever the hell they want? So we got to be careful about that logic. I don't think either side gets to do whatever the hell they want. And so I appreciate that Israel would sometimes do those, knock bombs, which are not the real bombs, but give you a warning. It's not perfect. There's tons of civilian casualties that Israel does. But at least it's better than no warning. And right now we're at no warnings. And so to be fair to Israel, Hamas didn't exactly give a warning here, okay? And so now that being said, you knock down an 11-story building, there's tons of civilians in there. And so they're all dead. So we showed you the video of the dead Israelis because I don't want anyone thinking that this isn't awful. It's absolutely awful. And this particular conflict definitely started by Hamas. Now, we don't have the videos of the 78 dead Palestinian children, but they look just like those kids.
Well, no, they don't. That is not fair at all, because nobody is slaughtering those children in cold blood. That is covered by Article 28 of the Fourth Geneva Convention, that very sadly and tragically during retaliatory war, there will be incidental death of children, of people who are not the desired target. That is legal, very sadly, but that is legal under the terms accepted of war. What is not legal is torturing, terrorizing, dragging across, taking hostages of children. That is not legal, that is not acceptable. And even though you're right that when you attack other armies, other soldiers, that is legitimate in the eyes of war, what's not legitimate is also the many, many reports of Hamas raping female soldiers that they conquered and then murdering them in many cases or taking them hostage after that. That is barbaric behavior that is not covered by any sort of Geneva Convention, not covered by any sort of international norm. And so it doesn't seem at all comparable, while obviously the death of any child is incredibly tragic, when you have to, as you just said, they have to respond. Of course they have to respond to an all-out war, the bloodiest day since the Holocaust. There's going to sadly be incidental death, but also Hamas always keeps their targets, their missile depots, their missile launchers in apartment buildings with civilians, in children's schools and hospitals, so it becomes nearly impossible to retaliate without the incidental death of children. And Israel holds themselves to a higher standard than America does when we go into Afghanistan or Iraq and kill hundreds of thousands of innocent people, so many of them children, by doing those knock bombs, by dropping leaflets, by calling people's cell phones, by announcing on television, we are coming, go and hide in a part of Gaza away from the border where we're going to be attacking first. That's a higher standard, and from that they have a better percentage of lower civilian deaths than is typically found in warfare by a good measure, yet it doesn't get reported that way. For some reason, when it's Jews that are doing it, when it's the state of Israel that is doing it, they say it's barbaric that their children being killed. How many times have you ever seen a report of the amount of children killed by the US in these wars that we've undertaken? Okay, it's not covered.
Let me agree and disagree in parts. So first of all, your comparison to what the US has done is perfectly legitimate. We killed, hundreds of thousands of innocent Iraqi civilians. So yeah, we killed people in the Mahdi army and they had it coming by attacking us. We had it coming by attacking them for no goddamn reason in Iraq, okay? So let's be honest about that. And we killed, murdered, you take whatever word you like, hundreds of thousands of Iraqis, kids, grandmothers, etc. So that part is absolutely true. So in terms of Israel having a better record than the average, I don't know what the average is, so you'd have to show me a study on what the average is, Ben. But oftentimes Israel will have, on average, a 10-to-1 kill ratio of civilians. So they'll kill 10 times as many Palestinians, sometimes in some conflicts up to 100 times as many Palestinian civilians as Israeli civilians. I am not moved by the defense of, they were all incidental. I mean, we killed 10 times as many of you, of your children as you killed of our children.
Well, in May,
but golly gee, it was just an accident, wasn't it? If you do it over and over and over and over and over and over again, is it really an accident?
Well, just to give you the statistic, just in May during Operation Shield and Arrow, the exact ratio was 1.42 to 1. It was nowhere near 10 to 1 or 100 to 1, where normally it's 3 civilians in typical warfare to 1 combatant. That is a better record. So I'd love to see where you get those numbers.
Two different numbers. You're talking about civilians to combatants.
Correct.
I'm talking about Israeli civilians to Palestinian civilians.
Oh, fair enough. But that's because the Palestinian people, due to their very tough economic situations, and I completely agree that we need to fix the conditions, we need to find a two-state solution, we need to find a way that these people can get their full freedom and human rights so that they aren't living in a very crowded, terrible living condition and being kept by control of the Israeli military, no doubt. But at the same time, that is the fact of the matter, and they can't ever fix that if they had not elected Hamas, which is recognized as a terror organization by the US, by the UK, by the European Union, and many around the world. Already, I believe, 87 nations have condemned these terrorist acts, and they have in their charter that Israel needs to be wiped from the face of the earth and all Jews need to be wiped out of Israel. They do not have any desire for a two-state solution. Once they were elected by a slim margin after, by the way, the occupation ended in Gaza in 2005, Israel straight up said, go ahead and try your own governance. And the next year, Hamas was elected by a slim margin and then immediately took their enemies, who are fellow Palestinians in the PLO, and threw them off buildings and dragged them behind cars dead, and have taken barbaric rule of that part of the Palestinian territories. And so how do you negotiate with people that want you eradicated? There is no negotiation.
Come on, Ben. All right, so let's start to focus it. So look, there's a lot I disagree with there. So first off, you could say Hamas was elected, so well then, maybe the civilians had it coming. Don't go down that route. We elected Dick Cheney, George Bush, Donald Trump. We did not have 9/11 coming. We don't have any of that stuff coming to us. And Israel elected Netanyahu, who is a terrible warmonger right-winger.
Agreed 100%.
Okay, so do not go down the road of, hey, you elected him, so we kill civilians. No, we do not.
I never said that. I was just telling you.
No, I hear you. I hear you. Okay, now you're right that Gaza is incredibly packed, and so if you show proof that Hamas has hid like a missile launcher underneath a school, then I get it. I wouldn't bomb that school anyway. We could agree to disagree on that, but I blame Hamas 200% if they put a missile launcher in a hospital or a school. Having said that, that is not often proven. Instead, we get generic talking points about, well, they're firing from a crowded area. But there is no non-crowded area of Gaza. There is no like magical area. They don't have, and so it's, and I've seen the Israeli Defense Forces literally use kids, Palestinian kids, as human shields. So I've seen, actually I haven't seen Hamas do that, but I would believe that Hamas would do that. But so
use
both
human
sides,
shields in what way? What have you seen?
like they literally use the kid with a gun above the kid. We've shown the video before, okay? So it doesn't mean all Israeli Defense Forces does that. It definitely does not mean that Israeli civilians do that, okay? So look, there is no question about atrocities on both sides. There's no question about that. Like Netanyahu says something absurd like, well, we're about to bomb the living crap out of Gaza and we're gonna basically, the defense minister said, we're gonna treat these human animals the way they deserve to be treated. And they talk of a siege and a purge, cutting off electricity, food, and water for God knows how long. So that is definitely directed at the civilians of Gaza, okay? Not just Hamas. There's no question about that either. And that's disgusting. So you can say, hey, they have their rightful vengeance. You saw the tapes. I get the desire for vengeance. And I get the desire to protect yourself, right? And would America do any different? Probably not. Would the country I came from originally, Turkey, do any different? Very likely not, okay? They would probably do something very similar. So we're talking about humanity here. We're not talking about Israelis or Palestinians. So in that sense, but there is no
occupation. How do you?
Yeah, there is no leaving Gaza. They're not allowed to leave. So Israel never ended the occupation of Gaza. That's a misnomer. They control the ports of entry for on land, sea, and water. It's an open air prison. So you can say, well, I mean, I don't know what you would say. I don't know what you would say. So Ben, look, I can go on and on. So is there horrible anti-Semitism in the world? Absolutely. Is there horrible anti-Semitism from Hamas? Absolutely. From some Palestinians in general? Absolutely, okay? Is that why they did this? It's probably a contributing factor and it's very hard to suss that out. But saying that's the majority factor when they've been under occupation for 50 to 75 years is a little absurd. There might be a huge anti-Semitism in Indonesia. Sorry, Indonesians, I have no idea, right? But they're not bombing Israel because Israel's not occupying Indonesia. So the question I have, which is unsolvable, but I'm curious what you think. When is the occupation enough? When do we say, for God's sake, let's separate? Please, please, please separate. We cannot live together, it's obvious, in that area, okay? I would build the largest walls you've ever seen in your life. You like walls? I'll give you walls. On the 1967 borders, we already know what the peace deal is. Both sides know what the peace deal is. You say that the Hamas doesn't want to recognize Israel. Look, honestly, that's, all right, let me just save the adjectives. Bottom line is, Hamas has offered in one peace negotiation, only once that I ever saw, to say that they would take that back. But honestly, it's irrelevant. Israel already exists, and it has existed for 75 years, and it's gonna exist, I hope, to the end of time, okay? So there's nothing Hamas can do about it. Israel's not gonna lose this war. It's not gonna, but terrible casualties, terrible casualties. But the Palestinians actually don't have a state. They actually don't exist.
Right.
And that's because Israel says that a set 56 to 75 year occupation isn't enough.
Well, no, but that's not true. So my response to that is it's not at all irrelevant whether their official charter of the governing body of Gaza is to annihilate Israel and not negotiate until every Jew's blood is eradicated from the land of Palestine. That's not a partner that you can possibly negotiate with.
Of course it is, Ben. So let me say, I got to jump in on that. Because, Ben, you're not wrong that that's horrific. Obviously that's horrific, right? But we always negotiate with horrific enemies. That's why so the Hamas leaders are idiots and immoral. So first of all, saying that in their charter is so dumb. It gives people an excuse to continue the occupation, even if you are inclined in the Palestinian direction. And Hamas, what is this attack? You think you're gonna win? You're gonna butcher a bunch of people, the world's gonna hate you, and then Netanyahu is going to punish your own civilians so severely. So it was such a monstrous attack, such a stupid attack in every imaginable way. But bottom line is, you can't just say, well, those guys are the bad guys and I don't like them and they're my enemy, so I'm not gonna negotiate. We have to negotiate.
I understand you have to negotiate, but you literally can't negotiate with people who say we will not accept any agreement, any solution. You can negotiate with the Palestinian Authority that is in charge of the West Bank. You can hopefully dismantle and destroy the Hamas leadership and help institute the actual far more reasonable-minded Palestinian Authority under Mahmoud Abbas and try to get them to negotiate a peace. But you say, when is enough occupation? How about the 30 times pre and post Israel's history that a two-state solution has been offered and the Arabs in this area have said no? How about all of the times that they have been offered that two-state solution, but they would rather instead keep up this antagonistic stature and posture with Israel? That is when it's enough. When the Palestinian people do not turn against Hamas and say this sort of leadership is not okay, because Israel, yes, it's part right and part not right what you said. The occupation of being inside the Gaza Strip ended in 2005, and yes, they kept control over much of their military. They kept military control over them and of their ports. Not all the ports, because Egypt has a port as well there and a land crossing, and that is also not allowed. They also, for some reason, don't allow the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip in there either, without weeks and weeks of applications and going through. So why is that? Their Arab neighbors could let them in too, but this seems to be a group of people in this area that are not wanting to find a peaceful solution to coexist. People, I'm sure, know, but if they don't, when after the Holocaust, just 3 years after the Holocaust, the Jewish people, I'm Israeli, I'm an Israeli American Jew. When the Israeli people were offered to split this area into two, and one be a land for the Palestinians and one for the Jews said yes, the Arabs said no, and immediately thereafter, the Jews were attacked by many countries on multiple fronts, which is what caused this problem in the first place. So when is the occupation enough? When the people who decided they were not going to live peaceably side by side with the people who were just almost annihilated in the worst thing in history, the Holocaust, just 3 years earlier, when they finally say we're going to overlook the titles that you say are so important to overlook, and I agree completely, titles of Israeli and Palestinian. We should get over these history, the history and the biblical stories that keep us at each other's throats and fighting forever. But Israel, I think it's very clear, is far more inclined to do that. 21% of doctors and nurses in Israel are Palestinians from the occupied territories or those living in Israel. There's a Palestinian member of the Supreme Court in Israel. These people are given full rights in Israel, and only those who are who are in the Palestinian territories have to have security forces monitoring their movements, simply because they continually send rockets and tunnels with fiery balloons and then now slaughtering innocent people in the streets. You cannot tell me that Israel has ever gone into the Palestinian territories and slaughtered people and raped people randomly and murdered people and taken old people hostage and taken children hostage. That has never happened. They instead, in the face of that, keep trying to say, we still want to offer peace. We still want to offer a solution.
No, they haven't said that in decades.
Not in decades. It's not true in decades. Netanyahu, no doubt, is a warmonger and is expanding settlements. I think that's very stupid and very antagonistic into the West Bank, and that might be part of how they were caught off guard by having more troops removed from Gaza and put in heightened security in the West Bank. But far more, I went and visited myself the Palestinian territories of Ramallah and Bethlehem. I went and visited Arafat's grave out of respect, out of a show of trying to find some sort of common ground and respect for people we even disagree with. And I do not see that same respect coming from people who are living in these territories, and despite horrible conditions that they want to end, and that the Israeli people want to end only if they can live in peace, and they are not granted that. My mom, who's Israeli, I asked her specifically, how do you respond to people who say that if it weren't for the occupation, none of this would be happening, none of these attacks would be happening? And she said, well, on a factual basis, the fact that that is what's causing this anger is true, but if it weren't for the occupation, Israel would not exist.
No, I'm sorry, I love your mom, but I don't agree with that at all. So, and by the way, if Israel ended the occupation, I would hope, and I certainly my sympathy, the sympathy of America and all decent people would completely switch over in every situation to the Israelis. Because then you would say, they gave you your country, you cannot attack the other country. That's the whole point, right? So now, having said that, look, guys, last couple of things, and then we're going to continue to cover this throughout the show. We're going to have the Republican reaction and the Democratic reaction, etc. But last things here are the Hamas Palestinians having an antagonistic posture towards Israel. Israel, for now a great number of years, has had a grossly antagonistic posture towards the Palestinians, including occupying them, millions of them,
but not murdering,
for decades.
But not murdering.
But Ben,
that's an enormous. That's the whole difference.
That's the whole point of the occupation. The minute anybody does anything wrong, they get killed. They get killed at a checkpoint.
Well, it's not does anything wrong. It's sending missiles.
No, but Ben,
it's not doing anything wrong. The Israelis, and I said it's wrong, but they're building homes in territory that they technically won in war when they were attacked, and that's what the standards that every nation is asked to stand by. And Israel's even willing to negotiate that, and even has given up land, and even gave Gaza back to control. And look what happened. It's been 17 years.
Control.
Not full control.
And of course not. That's the whole point.
But they let them build their own governmental structure, and it did nothing.
Hold on, Ben.
It ruined their people's lives.
Let me make my points. You don't have control of your own country if the minute you do an election, the other country actually controlling you says, we didn't like who you picked. So that's it, you're in an open air prison for the next 10 years, 20 years, 40 years, 800 years, however long it's gonna take. But that's not what
they did. They let Hamas control the area, and they still control it today, 17 years later. Look what happened. They can't
control any of their borders. They don't have a military. They don't have internal defense. They don't have any of these things. They're not a country. So look.
Because they've turned down peace agreements. No, they've turned down two-state solutions.
So let me give my perspective on the solutions, because everyone loves to say that, people turn down peace solutions. Some of the offers were ridiculous. So now there were a couple of good offers. And did people make mistakes? Absolutely. And so one of the heroes of this whole saga is a guy that I would have never expected growing up to be the hero. It was Yitzhak Rabin. And Yitzhak Rabin was part of some terrible things that happened in the past, right? But, and this is the most important part, but Rabin was willing to get past the old enmities and actually offer a real peace deal, okay? And then he was murdered by Israeli settlers before they could get to that peace deal. And that has damned us all. That has damned us all for decades more of this nonsense. But I want you to just think about this, and then we'll come back to the topic after the break, okay? What if Israel was occupied for 56 years, and all the Israeli citizens there were kept under the thumb of the Palestinians and Hamas? And every time they went to the UN to say, please give us a state, every time they went to go do the X, Y, or Z, they'd say, no, you didn't agree to a peace deal we once offered back in 1987. Ha ha, you Israelis are gonna be occupied for the rest of time. I would be disgusted by that. And I would fight against that with every fiber of my being. So yes, but the occupation, in my opinion, is a core moral evil we cannot get behind.
But they, instead of being occupied, are living in terror. They lived through decades in this exact same number of years that you mentioned of random suicide attacks, of buses blowing up. A family member of mine was blown up in a bus and has disfiguration all over her face and has to live like that forever. They deal with slaughter in the streets. They deal with having bomb shelters in their homes. My cousin was messaging me on WhatsApp yesterday, and I have an audio recording of her all of a sudden frightened, hearing air raid sirens, having to run down into a bomb shelter and afraid that they're being slaughtered. My uncle had to hide behind a tree last night randomly they're the very lucky ones that weren't slaughtered at a music festival by people that apparently want an agreement and want peace. You cannot end control of a situation. No country on earth would do it. No country that has people coming in.
I'd do it in a second.
You would just open your borders to murderers?
No. First of all, Ben, don't do that. So let's end on these two things for this segment, okay? So number one, there are no Palestinians or Israelis. They're not a monolith. There's Israelis that vote left-wing, there's Israelis that vote for peace, there's Israelis that are desperate for peace because they don't want to live in the conditions that Ben is talking about. The Israelis are sick of those conditions. They're sick of being terrorized.
That's why they're protesting Netanyahu so much.
And you saw those giant protests against Netanyahu. There are no just Israelis, okay? And there's certainly not a monolith of Jews. That is crazy talk. It's anti-Semitic. It is wrong in every conceivable way. There are also no just Palestinians. The evil guys that come across the border and do the terrorism are Hamas and other people that are part of the active fighters, but they're not at all the majority of the Palestinians. And so what would I do? I would do 1967 borders and I'd build giant walls, okay? And I might even say Palestinians, I know a lot of you have jobs in Israel and I know this is going to be devastating for you, but sorry, we're gonna do no crossing of the borders for a long time. So go call your friends in Lebanon and Jordan and everywhere else, and we got to get you jobs, and I hope the UN will help you, etc. But we're building giant walls, and I would let them go. I would give them their own countries.
If that's great, and I support that as well. But for the record, you can't have people who are. I think that's a good solution, Cenk. I'm just saying, for the record, you can't have people who are attacked and live under fear and then expect them somehow to not want to protect themselves. And the difference is, you just mentioned, there are protests against Netanyahu massively in Israel against his move towards heightening hostilities. And where are those protests in Gaza against Hamas? They don't exist.
Hamas is dictatorial. And so if you tried to do a protest against Hamas,
you get killed.
It would not end well for you. So that is definitely true.
So a perfect partner to negotiate with.
No, but this Dick Cheney said we don't negotiate with evil. No, we do. Because the other guys that are committing murders on the other side are not good guys. By definition, you have to negotiate with your enemies, no matter how evil they are, how terrible they are, what atrocities they've done. That's how war works. We here in America, we did a civil war. We killed 600,000 of each other, right, of Americans, and there was horrible atrocities on both sides. And then we negotiated with evil, and we came to a solution.
Yeah, and also sometimes the people themselves have to rise up and demand a change of leadership. If en masse millions of Palestinians in the Gaza Strip said no more Hamas, we do not accept it, that would certainly help the cause.
How about if the mass of Israelis said no more Netanyahu?
They're doing that.
Well, they haven't yet.
They're doing exactly that.
They haven't yet, but it doesn't matter because yes, Israel allows for more democracy inside Israel. That is true. And I've told you their Supreme Court sometimes is maddening, but sometimes it delivers real just solutions. Their press is vibrant and challenges Netanyahu, challenges different thought. Unfortunately, that's not as great in the Palestinian territories, but partly because they live under an occupation and it is very, very hard to get a moderate government inside an occupation. That is why I thought the war against Iraq that we launched was a disaster, because the minute you start something brutal, the most brutal parts of society win, and the moderates are driven underground. So we have to end occupation so we can get back to moderates, etc. But
if there was a partner you could negotiate with, that would be much easier to do. And there have been governments in the past in the Palestinian territories that you can negotiate with, and Hamas does not seem to be one.
Yeah, but then you continue the occupation forever. And I cannot stomach it, I will not stomach it. But I want to end on this note. Hamas did the attack this time, and they did atrocities, and you saw them with your own eyes. So let's not be equivocal about that. That is unequivocally wrong. So, and if you think, well, Israel occupation, etc., all that, we talk about the core causes, that doesn't mean it's justified. There are other ways to handle this, and I get super angry when Israel cuts off peaceful solutions or diplomatic solutions, because I don't want this to happen. But when you do this, you lose the moral high ground. No one who butchers kids or women or grandmothers has the moral high ground. So you're not doing the Palestinian cause any good. You're not doing Israelis any good. You're not doing the world any good. This was horrific, and they should have never started this. All right, we're gonna take a break. We'll be right back. All right, back on TYT, Cenk, Uygur, Gleib, Free Palestine 48 just joined, and 420 JR Man gifted 10 Young Turks memberships. We appreciate you guys. Go ahead, Ben.
All right. Squad members Cori and Rashida Tlaib are receiving harsh criticism from fellow Democrats over their responses to Hamas's assault on Israel and the ensuing escalation of violence. Let's start with what Cori stated last Saturday, just a couple days ago. I am heartbroken by the ongoing violence in Palestine and Israel. I strongly condemn the targeting of civilians, and I urge an immediate ceasefire and de-escalation to prevent further loss of life. Our immediate focus must be saving lives, but our ultimate focus must be on a just and lasting peace that ensures safety for everyone in the region. Violations of human rights do not justify more violations of human rights, and a military response will only exacerbate the suffering of Palestinians and Israelis alike, indicating there that she does not think there should be a military response to slaughter in the streets and homes of the Israeli population. She continues, as part of achieving a just and lasting peace, we must do our part to stop this violence and trauma by ending US government support for Israeli military occupation and apartheid. A word that I think is ridiculous to use. And she's literally suggesting that we, in the middle of this horrible terrorist tragedy and attack on the Israeli people, that we end US government support for our ally, our only true ally in the region, Israel. Rashida Tlaib, the only Palestinian American member of Congress, also referred to the conditions in Palestine as apartheid. She wrote, I grieve the Palestinian and Israeli lives lost yesterday, today, and every day. I am determined as ever to fight for a just future. The path to that future must include lifting the blockade, ending the occupation, and dismantling the apartheid system that creates the suffocating, dehumanizing conditions that can lead to resistance. As long as our country provides billions in unconditional funding to support the apartheid government, this heartbreaking cycle of violence will continue. So again, calling for an end of aid to our ally, Israel. Fellow Democrat Richie Torres took issue with those remarks and said the following in a statement. U.S. aid to Israel is and should be unconditional, and never more so than in this moment of critical need. Congress must act decisively to provide Israel with whatever it needs to defend itself in the face of unprecedented terrorism. Shame on anyone who glorifies as resistance the largest single-day mass murder of Jews since the Holocaust. It is reprehensible and repulsive. Josh Gottheimer, another Democrat, issued a similar critique. Two of my colleagues called for America to end assistance to Israel despite the countless images of Israeli children, women, men, and elderly, including Americans, murdered by radical Iranian-backed Hamas terrorists. It sickens me that while Israelis clean the blood of their family members shot in their homes, they believe Congress should strip US funding to our Democratic ally and allow innocent civilians to suffer. Both Ilhan Omar and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez issued less fiery statements than their peers in the squad. They called for a ceasefire and de-escalation. AOC did not refer to Israel as an apartheid state. And Omar stated that, quote, according to Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, the UN, and Israeli human rights group B'Tselem, Israel's policies meet the definition of apartheid. So she did, in fact, use that term. Cenk?
Yeah. So I want to get to a constructive solution in a second. We do have some disagreements. I wouldn't use the word apartheid at this juncture. It's rubbing salt in very recent and raw and horrible wounds. But I don't disagree that the occupation is some form of apartheid. Then we could parse words. No, don't call it that. Call it something else. But the occupation is a deeply problematic. I think the core of the problem to begin with. We had a discussion about that in the last segment that we did, but I wouldn't go in that direction. So Cori Bush says, don't have more war, right? Of course, none of us want more war, but of course Israel is going to try to find the people who have been kidnapped. Of course, Israel is going to strike back against Hamas. So how do you do it without killing more innocent civilians, like hitting an 11-story building, etc.? Well, that solution is not good or easy either. And so it's easy for me to say from safely outside of Israel, and I'm not in the Israeli Defense Forces, but this is the same thing that I say in the context when America does this, which is you need more people on the ground, and you need to go do the very, very difficult task of finding Hamas inside Gaza. So that means, yes, more soldiers will die, but I would rather have more soldiers on both sides do what they do than have more civilians on both sides die. And so, but it is a dangerous and not an easy situation at all, okay? I don't believe we should give unconditional aid to Israel, but this is not the time to withdraw aid from Israel. At the same time, I wouldn't increase aid. They have an overwhelming advantage over the Palestinians, over Lebanon, you name it. They have more.
Iran? How about Iran? That is backing.
Yeah, Israel has an unbelievable military advantage over Iran.
Yes, but I just don't want to I don't want to understate the fact that Iran is backing these horrible murders and horrible terrorist attacks.
Yeah, the Iranian government is awful, not just because of this, but also because of how they oppress their own people, and their list of crimes goes on and on. Again, that's not the question. The question is, what do you do about that? But Ben is right to point that out.
But also, just quickly, you said you wouldn't call it apartheid, then you said you'd call it some form of apartheid. And I just want to say on the definitions of apartheid, which typically is the rule from the minority of the majority, which is not the case here, but further, it's about racial segregation, legalized racial segregation. One group is deprived of political and civil rights. That is not the case here either, because like I said in the last segment, we have 21% of doctors and nurses in Israel are Palestinians. We have a Palestinian on the Israeli Supreme Court. We have increasing numbers in recent years of people from Gaza being allowed work permits into Israel to bring more money into the Gaza Strip and into the Palestinian territories. And you have Israeli settlers going into the Palestinian territories, which we both agree is not a good policy, but is the opposite of segregation. It's literally integrating Jews in with the Palestinians in these areas. So by no definition is it apartheid. Is it a messed up situation? Yes. Do the Palestinian people need to come to the table, and do the Israelis need to come to the table and find a peaceful solution, find a two-state solution, find one that can end this? Of course. But to use a term that just doesn't meet the definition just seems to further amplify and inflame anti-Semitism that just doesn't meet the basic definition of these words.
So, Ben, I said I wouldn't use apartheid today. That's not the right way to go as Israel's suffering these horrible wounds, okay, and deaths and kidnappings, etc. In terms of the definition of apartheid, you could parse it in two different ways. Ben explained, like when you're talking about minority rule over a majority, I wouldn't say that qualifies. But it doesn't, I don't care about the exact words that are being used. But my point overall, Ben, is if you say that Israel is treating the Palestinians fairly, which I don't think you're saying.
No.
Yeah, that's not at all true, right? And so maybe Palestinians inside Israel, and yes, they've got some discrimination there too, for sure, but overall they're citizens, etc. But the Palestinians in the occupied territories have no rights. And so their lack of freedom, lack of state, lack of rights is an abomination. And you can call that abomination any word you like, it doesn't really matter, okay? And so.
But much of their lack of rights in Gaza specifically is due to Hamas being a jihadi terrorist organization that literally wants to only create jihad against the Jewish people in Israel, deprives people of human rights, is the worst possible against the LGBTQ community when Israel is the most open in the Middle East when it comes to that.
So Ben, let me ask you
throw
something.
people off buildings.
No, I know we can go back into all
Sure.
of that, right? And so I'm not arguing in favor of Hamas or all the terrible things that they have done, and I know you're not arguing in favor of the terrible things Netanyahu has done.
Not at all.
Okay, so what I look, this is at the risk of opening this up when we have no time left, but I don't know what the Palestinian people, not Hamas, what the Palestinian people are supposed to do. So 56 years of occupation, nothing works. Going to the UN doesn't work. Peace treaties don't work. The violence doesn't work. So if Israel was occupied in a similar situation, and Muslims have been occupying the Jewish people inside Israel for 50 to 75 years, I don't know what we would counsel them. I don't know what you would counsel them. I don't know what I would counsel them. But are they just supposed to just sit there and take it? And how long do they take it?
No, I think obviously when you have, at the first place, lost territory in war, any nation by modern standards, then that is part of their territory. Israel has been willing to negotiate, has given up territory, is willing to give up more territory, not under this current regime. That needs to change. So the Israeli people need to rise up against Netanyahu as soon as this current horrible situation is over and demand change of leadership. And the exact same thing is what I would advise the Palestinian people, is to rise up and demand change of leadership. The vast majority still support Hamas, and the vast majority of Palestinians in Israel say that they would not move to a Palestinian state if one was given to them because of the horrible conditions that Hamas creates for them in those territories. They would much rather stay under the rule of Israel, those who live in Israel. So it has to come through electing, demanding, kicking out Hamas, electing a reasonable leadership, and then negotiating.
Under occupation, you will never get people to vote for moderates. It's not possible. It's never been done in world history. When people are occupied, oppressed, don't have rights, or live under the rule of someone else, some other ethnicity, tribe, religion, etc., they have never ever voted for moderate leaders. It's not possible.
That argument is exactly like you saying we should re-elect Trump. It's exactly like you saying here in America, it's not possible. We're under such terrible times.
No, I would love for them to vote for moderate leaders. I'm not saying don't. I would love it.
Well, that's the only solution.
But no, that can't be the only solution. That means it'll be a permanent occupation because people that are in those conditions never vote for moderates. It's a way of saying that's it. We're never going to free you. So I would free, as we discussed earlier, I would free them. I would build giant walls, and then if they dare cross over, the whole world agrees with you in striking back. And so last things though on this is, thank God we gave Israel Iron Dome. That saved probably countless lives in that assault. Those are kids, sisters, aunts, grandmothers, uncles whose lives were saved. So if you question the military assistance to Israel, I understand in terms of some of the policies of Israel, etc. On the other hand, look at all the lives we just saved. And I'll always take saving lives over not saving lives, but yes, some can find this controversial. I don't. I would also give Iron Dome to the Palestinians. And so that you can't just knock down civilian buildings, hospitals, schools, and go, oh well. So I know, but if you say no, only one side should have Iron Dome and the other side shouldn't, that is a tough moral argument. But I'm thrilled that Iron Dome protected the Israeli civilians that it did.
Yeah, but how about just negotiate and not continue to use violence as a means for peace? You cannot initiate violence as a means for peace.
I totally agree with that. So the Hamas attack is unjustifiable, it's immoral,
and
it's
always
wrong.
when the rockets come, and so that's the problem. There's never an instance in recent history where the Israeli government is initiating violence against the Palestinian people in these territories.
Except that the occupation is endless violence. They have to live under that rule. Thousands are imprisoned all the time. People, we cover the stories of the doctors, the nurses, anyone that came not even close to the wall were shot and killed. So there's been endless IDF atrocities, because that's what you do when you occupy people. You can't pleasantly occupy them, you crush them. And I don't want that. It's ruining the moral fiber of people I love. And so please stop. It's like 1967, Israeli professor says, if we continue this occupation all the way back then, he said it's not going to ruin Palestine. Yes, it will, but it's going to ruin Israel. stop. If you don't let these people go, we're gonna have to keep them down for all this time. And it's not only gonna ruin them, it's gonna ruin us. I couldn't agree more with that Israeli professor. So, look, but we've said our piece. You know what the reality is, and there are no winners here, okay? Only horrible death. Please somehow get the peace.
But just one last point, please, because you know for a fact that if you just let these people go, quote unquote, like you say, with Hamas in charge, they will immediately attempt and will succeed at killing mass numbers of Israelis. That's what they will do the moment they get that freedom.
The Israelis
it's in their
inside
charter.
Israel?
The Israelis inside Israel, the Israelis inside their own territory for certain will be killed like this instantly, and that's hundreds of thousands of Israeli people. You just cannot do that. You can't acknowledge on the one hand they are barbaric and horrible and they're dictatorial and just let them go and see what happens. It would be mass slaughter. So
I don't agree.
So hopefully, what I hope happens is going forward after this is done, the initiation of violence should be what's repudiated instantly on either side by the world community, because we could end up in World War III over this. Iran gets involved, and Russia gets involved, and China gets involved on their side, and we have a huge international problem on our hands. But I hope what happens is Israel is successful in dismantling Hamas in the coming weeks and months.
It's never going to happen.
We'll see what happens. But if they do that, then I think is the one chance you can then hopefully help bring
they've killed so
a reasonable
many
group.
Palestinians that Hamas will only be stronger, not weaker.
Well, it will probably be a ground war, and it hopefully will be much more targeted, and it will hopefully will result in the killing of as few civilians as humanly possible. But as you yourself said, there is no choice but to retaliate. So we have to hope it's done in a way that minimizes civilian loss, and then we can find a way forward with a negotiating partner. But you cannot negotiate with terrorists hell-bent on killing you, so that has to change.
Well, the Palestinians could say the same thing about the Israelis. We cannot negotiate with monsters who have occupied us for 75 years, deprived of us.
And who have gone to the negotiating table so many times?
Etc. So we can go back and forth on that 100 times. But look, there is a model. People are not gonna like the model. Turkey took over Cyprus, and instead of keeping the whole thing, and instead of occupying the Greeks in that island for decades after a decade, they said, you guys go over there, we come over here, and then we build a giant wall. You know how many people have died in Cyprus since then? 0. So we could say that's a terrible model. I would take that model over this model. And so but if you do a peace treaty, the whole point of peace is that you do not slaughter people. And so if that peace treaty is violated, then the whole world would unite against Hamas or whoever violated it. That's the point of peace treaties, and we have to get to one. That Ben and I agree on.
100%.
We got to take a break. We'll be right back. Back on TYT, Cenk and Ben with you guys, also Danielle Garofalo, Sam Blutsky, the one, and Scott Adams. They all just joined by hitting the join button below. We appreciate you guys, and Danielle, thanks for doing it at the premium level. That helps everybody because it allows us to keep the prices low. We appreciate you. Okay, Ben.
All right, we got some Geraldo for you. Let's run the video.
Nobody has any idea where these people are coming from, and we know they come from prisons. We know they come from mental institutions, insane asylums. We know they're terrorists. Nobody has ever seen anything like we're witnessing right now. It is a very sad thing for our country. It's poisoning the blood of our country. It's so bad, and people are coming in with disease. People are coming in with every possible thing that you can have.
Former President Fantasyland, who has an evil, weird reality in his own brain that he likes to state as facts, decided to take a page out of Adolf Hitler's playbook last week during an interview with the National Pulse to discuss the immigration situation in the US. Before we get into the reactions and responses to this, we need to talk about why this is a big deal. Referring to migrants as, quote, poisoning the blood of a nation, close quote, is something Hitler wrote about in his manifesto, Mein Kampf, which from all reports, Trump used to keep by his bedside as an example of great public speaking and great leadership. Hitler painted Jews and migrants to Germany as poison to the Aryan race and the German country. In a chapter titled Race and People, Hitler wrote, quote, "All the great civilizations of the past became decadent because the original creative race died out as a result of contamination of the blood." And in another passage, he links the poison which has invaded the national body to an influx of foreign blood. In addition to spreading language that echoes white supremacy and Hitler's racial hatred, he's making baseless claims about the people who are crossing the border. Everything he said there is not proven, as he said, and you don't know they're coming from insane asylums and are terrorists. He's making that up, as he is wont to do. At campaign rallies, Trump has repeated that leaders of unspecified South American countries were releasing patients from mental hospitals to send as migrants to the United States. But fact checkers have found no evidence for the claim. Surprise, surprise. Donald Trump making stuff up again. Wild. Jonathan Greenblatt, the chief executive of the Anti-Defamation League, called out Trump for these comments, saying they're racist and xenophobic. Insinuating that immigrants are poisoning the blood of our country echoes nativist talking points and has the potential to cause real danger and violence. We have seen this kind of rhetoric, toxic rhetoric, inspire real-world violence before in places like Pittsburgh and El Paso. It should have no place in our politics, period. Former Trump ally and Fox News host Geraldo Rivera first blasted Trump on X after the interview came out, focusing most on the disease-carrying aspect, and then said this on CNN.
I think it's vile. I think it's disgusting. It's very disappointing to sink to that level. It's, for me, a personal embarrassment that we were friends for so long. This language is racist. It is really disgusting. And you know, some things cannot abide. We cannot abide certain things. And he has crossed the line. I beseech his followers to listen to what he said about poison blood. Who else used that kind of language, that kind of poisonous rhetoric? It was the Nazis, and I hate to use Nazi or Hitler references, but it is impossible to miss the obvious parallels.
Geraldo Rivera, always a man who has an opinion that keeps him on television. First was friends with Donald Trump for so long and somehow didn't find anything he ever said offensive until now, his references to the poisoned blood of immigrants. And now it's a bridge too far because Geraldo was fired from Fox and is now on CNN. And I don't ever believe you can trust anybody with a ridiculous mustache like that. That's my opinion. Rivera was also asked during his opinion about comments made by Trump spokesperson Stephen Chung. Let's see the damage control Trump's team tried to lay out and how Rivera wasn't buying it.
A Trump spokesperson, though, said this in a statement that this is normal, a normal phrase that is used in everyday life, in books, television, movies, and in news articles. For anyone who thinks that it's racist or xenophobic is living in an alternate reality, consumed with nonsensical outrage. But the idea that poisoning the blood is a phrase that is normal, that most people say, it just doesn't pass a common sense test.
Excuse me, I apologize to you and your audience, but I have to say that the spokesman's excuse was absolute. Really, it is low down and dirty. Give me a break. A normal everyday discourse. Who talks about poison blood? Who talks about that? Who says that an immigrant is poisoning? It is beyond. It really is beyond the beyond. It's not. This is not appropriate discourse. This is not fair play. This is awful. Just awful.
My friends and I talk about poison blood all the time. It's everyday lingo. It's like, hey, what's up, man? Don't poison the blood today. I mean, of course, Geraldo is right on this, but somehow he was not offended by saying there's very fine people on both sides of a white supremacist rally. He's not offended by making fun of every group that Trump has always made fun of and demonized throughout his entire existence and presence on the political landscape. Cenk?
Yeah. So look, I think Geraldo's, generally conservative, and so he doesn't. Sometimes he gets animated about things when it affects him. And now in this case, he's half Latino, half Jewish, so this affects him in every way. And so he is. I think he's genuinely disgusted by Trump. But Ben is absolutely right that we could have used some of that discussed earlier. And when he did 1,000 things, including going into a room filled with Republican Jewish leaders and saying nobody likes to renegotiate more than this room. A bunch of basically calling Jewish Americans, people who squelch on their deals. No, you are, you ass. Donald Trump is the one that never pays his bills, never pays his debts. He's like the worst person on earth. And then he puts that stereotype on Jews and so many others. And guys, it's not an accident that they said the Jews will not replace us in Charlottesville, and Trump said there were fine people on both sides. It's not an accident that 2 of the shooters targeted synagogues. Now, in this case, they're referring to Latinos, but they're using these old school. And the reason why we're saying Nazi and Geraldo said Nazis, because literally no one else talks about the poisoning of the blood of a nation other than Hitler and Trump. So find me any other reference. And by the way, if you do, it'll be a murderous dictator. There are no pleasant people that talk about the poisoning the blood of a nation. What that means is our blood is pure and their blood sucks because they're the others. Whether they're Latinos or Jews or anything else, we can't let them infect our blood. And by the way, Trump also talked about how they carry disease. And again, this is Nazi 101. Like the Nazis often talked about, we can't let other people into the country because they carry disease, and the Jews carry disease, and they're poisoning our blood. And we have to kick them out of the country, or we have to do something else about them. And they found something else. And so this kind of talk is not within 1 billion miles of normal. So if you're MAGA and you catch feelings because we've offended your fascist leader, your feelings are not my concern. My concern is that you've picked the wrong goddamn guy. So you want to pick someone who's anti-establishment, have at it. I would love it. You want to pick someone who wants to fight corruption, that would be amazing, right? But he ain't it. He ain't it. He's personally corrupt. He robs you all the time. He steals from you all the time. Oh, give me your money, give me your money. And then what does he do? Buys giant paintings of himself. He's an egomaniac. And it's not an accident that they chose poisoning the blood of a nation. That you do research to pick a term that specific, a phrase that specific that no one else uses. And you saw it when Tucker Carlson was on Fox News, and he would talk about how the immigrants will not replace us. That was a phrase he used several different times after Charlottesville. They're just taking what the Nazis said and replacing Jews with immigrants, sometimes not replacing. So, okay, if you're hardcore MAGA, nothing will move you. And if he literally said, yes, I am a Nazi, and I don't want these people being impure, and we have the pure blood, and we should do whatever the hell we want to them, I know some portion of MAGA would be like, oh, finally. Keep it real. And by the way, okay, if you're not in that portion of MAGA, you can ignore that. And you can say, but at some point, it's on you to say, this doesn't represent me. If there was any leader that I liked that talked about any group of people, white people, straight people, whatever, can't even imagine it, right? But that said they're poisoning the blood of our nation, I would never support that guy. I would never support that guy. But if you do and you think, it's not that big a deal. Well, I guess it's not that big a deal to you, but it's a giant deal to the rest of us who don't want to live under fascist rule. And if you were outraged that Democrats call Trump fascist, then you would be so livid at Trump right now. Why would you play into that narrative by using only phrases that fascists use? Are you livid? Are you MAGA? Are you livid at Trump for making you all look like fascists? If you are, you have a funny way of showing it. Pick a new leader. I know you won't. And you'll blame everyone else, and you'll have nothing but excuses, and you call everything fake news even though you just heard him say it. All right, no, I know, only the Nazis and Trump use it, but I bet it was a coincidence. If you can sleep at night, go ahead. But we have to defeat this monster. We have to defeat this monster. That guy cannot be in charge of the country again.
And at some point we have to stop giving the benefit of the doubt and giving more chances to his supporters to say, at what point do you leave this person? That's almost, it becomes in a more extreme version, 2/3 into the Holocaust saying, do you guys still support Hitler here? The vast majority of the German population? Well, at some point, you either rise up against a leader who has demonized every group or you endorse it. Even if you're not actively supporting it verbally, if you are out in the public sphere saying, I support Trump no matter what, and included in that no matter what is a history of racist, misogynistic, vile statements, not to mention straight up crimes against our country, treasonous actions to overthrow our own democracy, you are that. Anyone who still supports Trump now is someone who supports racism, misogyny, and is against the democracy of the United States. You're out of chances now. We just have to defeat you.
All right, we're gonna take a break here, guys. We have more on the Israeli war, including a Republican reaction, including a senator saying we should invade Iran. God help us all. Before we go to the break, Ben, thank you for doing this today. I appreciate you, brother.
Thank you so much for the open conversation and for asking me to lead these stories on such a difficult topic. It means a great deal to me. Thank you, Cenk.
Thank you to you guys for making this possible. We'll be back. Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and I'll see you soon.